you excited for this pod? Pod number 2?
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
Pod number 2.
Talking about some interesting things today.
This Axie Infinity thing is just... What's happening?
The largest ever hack and theft in crypto history.
So let me intro Jared. Jared's an ex-founder and fund manager in crypto. He's now a crypto and equity trader. I'm an ex-CEO and management consultant, currently head of growth at Moremoney Finance. And nothing we say on the show is financial advice. The reason why we are doing this podcast is to further our own understanding of the blockchain. So something we'd be doing anyways, but we just decided to put it on tape so you can follow along in our journey. So what are we talking about this week?
We're talking about the Axie hack and DeFi Kingdom's launch to Subnet.
So Axie Infinity lost around 600 million US equivalent dollars in Ethereum,
Yep.
Which was stolen from the Ronin bridge, which is a bridge and a chain.
Yes.
How did this happen? How does this happen?
It's kind of complicated. I don't even know if it's worth going into the full details, but
I think it is.
essentially, they had their own chain set up by part of the team that works with them on Axie. There's basically three important parties here: is the Axie team and game itself. There is the Ronin bridge and the Ronin chain, which is the chain that Axie is running on, and then there's Sky Mavis, which is, I think, the kind of the developers of pretty much everything.
So what's the difference between Sky Mavis and the team?
Sky Mavis are the people who created everything, and the Axie team are the people who work on the game. And the Sky Mavis people work on the back end, and I may be getting some details mixed up, but they're the important parties here.
Okay. And what happened exactly?
So, like any chain, you have validators, which approve and sort of process all the transactions that are happening on a chain.
And this is on the Ronin chain.
Yeah, so on the Ronin chain, you had a number of validators.
Do you know how many? Is it decentralized or is it semi-centralized? Like what's the...
So this chain is not decentralized. I don't think it's decentralized whatsoever.
And we're not talking about the multi-sigs who are allowed to accept or reject trades or transactions. You're really talking about the validators who validate the blockchain.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And so super centralized.
Yeah. Very centralized.
Okay. And was this the point of failure, or it's related to this?
It seems like this was the point of failure.
Okay.
The only reason why this whole thing was allowed to happen was because the person who got in and hacked the system was able to get basically a majority vote to allow these transactions to take place. And so they needed 5 validators' permission to make this happen. 4 of them were from Sky Mavis. 1 of them was from Axie. You would think that even if they were decentralized in the sense that there would always be the 4 that you need from Sky Mavis and that 1 extra one from Axie, that if you get into one, you can't get into the other, and therefore, you can't do any kind of big hack like this. You can't make anything happen because, like a multi-sig, if you don't have the required number of signatures to make a transaction happen, it cannot process. And so what happened was there was some kind of an allowance in a previous transaction that made it so that basically the Axie team had their validator on just full accept for everything to the Sky Mavis validators. But the problem is that after they added this temporary allowance for these transactions to happen, or these approvals to happen, they didn't remove the allowance, which if it was temporary, they should have removed it after the need for whatever they were doing was gone. but it was just left there the whole time. And then the person who got into the system was able to exploit that fact and take, over 170,000 Ethereum and 25 million USDC.
How was this uncovered actually?
This was actually uncovered because there was somebody who was trying to withdraw their Ethereum from the Ronin chain back onto Ethereum, and they were unable to do so. And
Was that because all the Ethereum was essentially gone,
yeah,
or
so basically they had
right,
run out of funds.
right?
And then when they tried to withdraw, this person was taking out their money from the bridge that sent, like a support ticket to their team or something, and they were like, why can't I withdraw my Ethereum to the Ethereum chain? And they looked into it and they found out that all of their money was gone. Surprisingly, nobody knew that this hack occurred for 6 days.
Right. Which is sort of believable, actually. Partly, I think if you're sort of thinking about a team that's developing, and everyone's overwhelmed, they're trying to push things forward. Um, yeah, I mean, I could, potentially this is true. Hopefully there was no ill intent of like, we've known this for 5.5 days and we're just
Hmm.
not talking about it. Um, Usually these things come out pretty quickly. So what do you think it feels like to be a part of the Axie team right now? What are they going through?
I think they're
A
in
lot of
panic
sleepless
mode.
nights. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so what happens to Axie?
It's still unclear because basically, if there's a chance, I'd say it's a very slim chance that they can recover the funds. Then technically everything can go back to normal, but they're still going to suffer a hit in terms of their credibility because losing that much funds and not knowing about it for 6 days is going to really highlight some red flags in people's minds and be like, can I trust you a second time with my money?
Right.
Uh,
Not knowing about it for 6 days and then not clearly communicating to the community what is happening, which is something we've seen time and again, right? Like often these things happen. I'm thinking
yeah.
about the Sifu situation recently on Avalanche with Mim and Abracadabra, where someone was found to have had a criminal background. He was a treasurer, and there was sort of some commentary, but not a lot of commentary. And it's I think for the founders or for the people who are working on the team, they know the whole story, but they're
Hmm.
not realizing necessarily that there's a lot of people in the market who don't know all those details, and you need to come out with a lot of very clear communication, which is often doesn't seem to happen right away,
Yeah.
which is sort of a major issue. So um, I would disagree with you that they for sure are not getting the funds. I would think that I would probably call it 50-50. I mean, because what is the hacker going to do with this $600 million of Ethereum? It's hard to move off chain. I don't think it's as easy as people think.
That's true. It will be hard to do almost anything with the funds, especially because now there's a big black mark on this wallet, and anything that it connects to is going to probably have a blacklist where um, it's just going to be locked down. I'm pretty sure that the person in charge of this wallet actually tried to send some funds to some centralized exchanges, and I'm pretty sure those funds didn't, they just got snapped up.
So it's sort of an interesting reflection to think that we're trying to build a completely decentralized system, but really, when there's a hack, everyone's like, centralization is not so bad. It sort of ends up saving you.
Yeah.
So, what's the price of Axie Infinity, and how have they been impacted from that perspective?
So this is the most surprising thing is that Axie Infinity, the AXS token, is currently at $62, 62.5 as the time of doing this. And the craziest thing of all is that it's really not that down all that much since kind of the news about this hack. came out. It's somewhere between 10 to 15%.
What's our explanation for this?
Um, I have no idea. My mind is boggled by this actually, because very often when you see kind of scandals like this occur in crypto, the people on the centralized exchanges are going to start um, like mass selling these tokens. They're going to start shorting it. They're going to start selling it. It's going to be, no one wants to take any of these things into their.
Could there be something different about the profile of the gaming investors? I'm less familiar with this.
I mean, potentially there could just be a lot of people who still see the value in the underlying project. But there's a lot of people who just see something and they invest in it. They don't even know what Axie is. They just have the token because they see it going up.
Mhm.
There is another explanation in the possibility that because there's so much of this token that's currently locked in the ecosystem on the Ronin bridge, in the Axie, system that cannot be withdrawn right now.
Yeah,
I think once those funds, and by the way, those funds are locked down because the team decided that, just for security reasons, in case anything else happens, they wanted to pause things happening on this bridge so that nothing can be withdrawn. And I'm thinking that once these funds get unlocked, a lot of people who are affected by this are going to want to be able to, if they don't get any kind of compensation for their losses, they're probably going to bail out very quickly. And
yeah.
then you could see this thing starting to slide down fast.
Yeah, there's potentially a lot of pent-up demand to sell, but that can't actually access the market. And as soon as they hit the market, especially since these users are the ones being directly affected,
Yeah.
uh, there's going to be like an emotional streak there probably when this opens up. I mean, the boggling part is why anyone who can sell is not selling, because you have to see this coming and sort of want to get away from that wave
Hmm.
of discontent.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, not financial advice again, everyone.
definitely.
But yeah, just sort of a strange situation. Yeah, I'm curious to watch this unfold,
Hmm.
and I'm also curious to get more details on how did this hack happen exactly? Was it on the bridge? Was it on the chain, or a combination of both? And did it happen because of the validator setup or the multi-sig setup, or again a combination of both? So super interesting story.
Yeah.
Probably not a great story for DeFi or crypto in general. But there's been a lot of talk, I think, in the community about the danger of bridges. And
Hmm.
this sort of touches upon this. Um, how does a bridge work? Why don't we talk about that quickly?
Sure. I
Can
have.
you, yeah,
Yeah. Um, so it's a pretty simple concept. A bridge is basically just a centralized location to store a certain amount of crypto assets, whatever kind of tokens can be deposited into it that you want to credit on another chain or another system of some kind. And so, for example, if you wanted to get onto the Axie bridge or the Axie chain or any other chain from a different chain and you're using a bridge, what you would do is, for example, if you have one Ethereum and you want to get that Ethereum onto the other place, you're sending it to the location of this bridge, goes into the wallet, and once they have your token in their wallet, they're just going to mint a sort
a
of a
copy?
replica. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so
And then
if
they
you're,
lock up the original token, and that token is safe in that, let's call it a vault.
yeah,
And then there's a copy on the other chain. So the problem happens when that vault gets attacked, generally speaking.
yeah. So if you have, let's say you have 100,000 Ethereum or a million USDC or whatever on your bridge, and you have an equivalent amount of that tokenized on your chain, which means that you have these funds in two locations. You have the funds on your chain, which are representing all of the funds in your bridge. So if the funds in your bridge get removed while you still have all of those funds still on your chain, all of those funds have now been devalued. And so you have an Ethereum or a USDC that is now not worth one Ethereum or one USDC because it's not fully backed up by the underlying collateral that would have been
So
in the bridge.
the bridge is a huge point of failure
Yeah.
as a result. Until we get bridges that are sort of standardized and very hard to attack, I would imagine like the fact that we have so many different bridges is probably the biggest issue here. If we had a standard system that was sort of proven out for a while and everyone had the same standard, maybe you could trust its architecture. I mean, you could argue that it becomes a bigger failure point because it could all fail at once. But likely you're diversifying your risk and the risk of exploits, I would think. Does that make sense?
Can you say it again?
Does that make sense? Like, once you, if you had the same bridge architecture that that has been proven out to work. So
Yeah.
I'm sort of thinking, about our next discussion that we're going to enter into now, which is talking about subnets, talking about DeFi
Right.
Kingdom, which is another game. And when you're working on a subnet, essentially you have different blockchains talking to each other, right? But of the same protocol. Therefore, the bridge between the different blockchains is the same bridge. So if you build a really, really good bridge that is very standardized and works really well and has been proven out to work really well and is fast and reliable, so on,
Yeah.
you could have sort of this multi-chain approach where all the chains talk to each other, and it's safe because you don't have 20 different types of bridge architectures that some of them are good, some of them are not so good. You have one, and you can just take it and just copy it over and over and over, and sort of believe that it will work for you. I think after a period of time where it's been shown to work well.
I would agree, but the only thing that I would say about that, just to play devil's advocate, would be that if you have any kind of like vulnerabilities in this bridge that get found out, if they're all the same kind, then if you have multiple bridges across multiple platforms, they could all be vulnerable to the exact same exploit at the same time.
Right, right. I would personally feel better in that system. I think if you have a bridge architecture where, I don't know, after like a year of using it on a mass scale, it has not been exploited. At some point you have to start believing that it's probably pretty foolproof.
Mhm. I mean, I would agree. I think maybe we'll see which ones come out of that, and then just speculation, but who knows? Maybe we could see bridging as a service come to the market.
Right. So, okay. So DeFi Kingdom is a pretty popular game. It's running on the Harmony network. They're trying to be across many different chains, and their first stop is the Avalanche chain. But they didn't just come to the Avalanche main chain. They decided to create their own subnet.
Yeah.
I'm sort of my potential prediction is that the Avalanche subnet works so well for them because they're going to essentially own the architecture of that subnet. That are they going to want to go to other chains after that? That's sort of a big question for me. If they're so successful with this subnet, what's the point of continuing to develop across different chains? Number one, and if they do it, it's going to be an interesting case study to see the performance of this game on the Harmony network versus the Avalanche subnet network versus, I don't know, let's call it like Phantom or wherever they go next, to sort of watch how this unfolds is going to be super interesting. That's number one. Number two, my understanding is that they can now use their underlying coin, I believe it's called Jewel.
Jewel token.
The Jewel token, so they can use it for gas on the subnet, right? They won't be able to do that anywhere else. So it's sort of I would think, a huge advantage as well.
Yeah.
Luigi DeMeo, who's I believe the head of DeFi at Avalanche, had a tweet yesterday about this and said horizontal scaling. There's been 216,000 transactions on this DeFi Kingdom subnet today, and 800,000 transactions roughly on the Avalanche C chain today. So the Avalanche network added 25% more load without any impact to the Avalanche C chain. Therefore, therein lies the beauty of subnets. And I have to agree with this tweet. This is sort of
Absolutely.
this is pretty wild.
Hmm.
If you had brought this to the C chain, I mean, you would have seen higher fees. This is
Yeah, you would have had
undebatable.
massive amount of congestion.
Right.
That is if like there was a launch or something taking place like on this scale, you'd be seeing maybe a tripling of gas fees or prices, maybe a quadrupling, because on a regular basis, the Avalanche chain is very cheap to use. But when you get some congestion or some kind of big, some new popular thing launches and everyone wants to get in on this at the same time, then you can start seeing some congestion happen. And in order to kind of, spread it out and make the fees lower again, they're going to raise it up so that people, maybe, oh, okay, maybe I'll do it in 30 minutes.
Yeah. And I think we should maybe add a little bit more context to this. I think the reason we're both fans of Avalanche, I think if I can speak for you, one of the main reasons why we're such fans is there's really two reasons. There's the gossip protocol, which
Hmm.
is very, very fast.
Yeah,
So it gives you a time to finality or like very, very low latency. So you're able to process things very quickly. And then you have the subnet architecture, which essentially allows for theoretically unlimited scaling because every application that
unlimited
needs a
horizontal
log,
scaling. Absolutely.
right?
Yeah, you
So
can go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Well, it's a pretty amazing technology in terms of seeing this in a decentralized manner on a blockchain because up to this point, like there hasn't been a lot of really great developments in terms of scaling a blockchain or addressing the trilemma. Um, and I think y- as we're going to see in the future or in the near future, um, Avalanche on its own with the gossip protocol and the validation system, the way that you can stake it, they're not burning your gas for fees for the miners. They're just rewarding those validators with emissions. It takes a lot of greed out of the system. And then with the addition of subnets, you can just have your base layer of the C chain, the X chain, the P chain, and then an unlimited number, theoretically, of subnets doing specific purpose things just as far as you can see.
I sort of on a small tangent on what you said, we don't often talk about all this money that is being given to miners,
Hmm.
which obviously secure the network, but it's everyone talks about how Bitcoin is not inflationary, but there's roughly, I think at this moment, around $45 million a day is the cost of miners that they need to get paid this amount to run Bitcoin.
Hmm.
That roughly amounts to, I believe around like, if you do the math on the total valuation for Bitcoin, it's around 1.6% a year of the total value of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Uh, this is a loss of 1.6%. I sort of see it as inflation. I mean, you're losing that much value every year. There's no really difference. So, it's not 10%, which is which is probably what the U.S. dollar is seeing. But it's still I would rather not lose 1.6% than I'm wasting every single year. We shouldn't be as good as Visa and Mastercard. We should be, which charge around 2% fees. We should be much better than that. Hopefully, like the blockchain future would bring us um, much closer to something that's more interesting. So,
Well, just
yeah,
to quickly, just to, if I'm going to take the side of Bitcoin, I would say that if, let's say, your operating costs are about 1% of your ability to generate a revenue, I think you're doing pretty good.
again, I think it's a better fee than other alternatives, but I think I would like to see humanity. It's waste, and I think innovation and progress comes by waste reduction. Companies get better by improving their processes, which is essentially waste reduction. And if you have on the global economy, a waste, every time an action is performed, every time a supplier buys from another supplier, there's a 2% or a 1% loss every single year on average, or on every transaction. This is, an incredible source of waste. And if we can get that down to 0.1 of 1%, which seems like an achievable goal for humanity, if money is really just essentially a spreadsheet where, I do some work and I am owed a certain amount of capital, which is what money is. This shouldn't cost more than 0.1 of 1%. There's no reason for this to be such a drain on humanity.
Well, I
In
think
my
that's where
opinion.
the argument could be made that Bitcoin is more along the lines of a commodity, which I think makes sense for it.
Right. I think it's an overcomplication of the basic concept of money. But let's get back to subnets.
Yeah,
Perhaps we could do maybe a whole show about Bitcoin. I'm sure we could do more than one.
we should.
Yeah, we should. So, what are the challenges and failure points for the subnets? What do we want to see? Like, what would be the objective that we would be pleased with soon in how this plays out?
So definitely, I think one major challenge is just usability, getting them to the point where people can interact with them in a very easy way without adding extra steps or extra, uh, time or more money or whatever the case. If you find it tedious to like have to bridge your money to then do something and then bridge it back off, maybe you're just going to want to do something on the C chain instead of going on a subnet, even if you're going to, potentially save a bit of money, who knows? So we're going to have to wait and see because they're still very new. It seems like this is one of the first ones that has a real use case. Um, a lot of the subnets that we've seen so far are mostly just demos to see how it works. Like there's the
Mhm.
Spaces one where you kind of have this Avalanche-based kind of social media network, it looks like,
I
system.
guess, yeah, it's a social media network slash place to store information. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, that one was interesting, but then again, you didn't need to bridge anything, and it was just a demo.
Yeah.
So if it was a real case scenario where you needed to first transfer some of your funds over, so that then you could, claim your names or something, and then you kind of have your funds in two different locations, and it creates a little bit of like, I wouldn't say it's a big problem, but it's just something that people are going to have to figure out because, it's just like anything. It's you don't want to if you want to be able to just use the whole system seamlessly. If your funds are split in two, or you have to bridge them over to one place to get something done, it just kind of adds extra layers of complication,
Yeah.
and
The goal is
it's not
that
like.
your mother is able to use this system, right? So if you have to
Mhm.
sort of do these extra steps that
That's what I'd
are
like to see. Yeah.
pretty, yeah, that are pretty easy for DeFi users at this point, that's one thing. But we want to sort of widen the circle of appeal, right? The blockchain world is really going to win when everyone's able to use it. Currently, we're not there, right? It's something that doesn't get talked about a lot, I think, in the
Mhm.
space, but we're very, very far away from a usable widespread system.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, doing a
I
Bitcoin
mean,
transaction is not like simple. Like you need to download a wallet. You need to learn how to use this wallet. You need to not make mistakes in the way you copy the addresses. It's if you've never used this and you're alone learning this and you're not computer savvy. Um,
I think a very good example is just the fact that I don't remember the specific number, but I'm pretty sure at least 30% of all Bitcoin are just lost for good.
because people send them to the wrong address.
You can send it to the wrong address. If you're
You
not,
could lose your
if you're not,
keys.
you can lose your keys. Yeah.
Right. That's pretty wild. So what I would like to see for subnets is number one, no hacks. There can be a hack that would be great. And I think has Avalanche had a hack so far? I can't
I think
recall.
Avalanche is hack free thus
Hack free,
far.
right? Thus far. There may be protocols running on Avalanche that have been hacked, but
Yeah, maybe. But as far
not
as
Avalanche
the
itself.
Avalanche itself, no.
Yeah, right.
Maybe some very small ones, but none of the big ones have had any major scandals yet.
Okay, so I think that's an important, sort of a preamble, and then I agree with you. If there's a way that you can keep your funds somewhere, and every time you do a transaction, unless you're doing repeated transactions all the time, like for a game, maybe you actually want to bridge your funds and have them on this subnet, therefore,
Yeah, I
because
would
you're
say
going to be
so.
there a lot, but
Hmm.
it would be nice for, if you want to just use a DEX and the DEX has a subnet, you have to bridge your funds, do your trade, bridge your funds back. It would be nice if it was sort of a one-click uh, process where you click and it all gets done automatically in the background with low fees. Again, that's another sort of high hope is that it's number one click. Number two, there's a way to do it very low fees,
Hmm.
which doesn't seem that way
Um,
with the DeFi Kingdom so far. And I'm not sure what bridge architecture they're using.
yeah, I'm not sure either. I haven't seen much about it,
There's a lot of
but
subnet details that we need to sort of hammer out, and,
yeah,
and it's been
for
hard to
sure.
find information on this. I get the impression that the Avalanche team is just building really fast, and they're not
Hmm.
communicating everything because they don't necessarily. I don't know that they know exactly all the answers to these questions, and they don't have time to necessarily spend a lot of resources to communicate it because they're sort of
Well,
busy building. But I think we're getting to a point where we need to
mm,
know more about what's coming and how it's gonna come. I feel like this is a very TradFi sort of request,
mhm.
and people in crypto are like,
I
no,
would
we're just
say
building, and you have to wait
that.
and see. But
Mhm. So initially, this was actually the case with Ethereum. When Ethereum launched their their whole thing, ability to do um, smart contracts and do all this stuff, like they they didn't have a whole lot of information about how to do things. They just, here's the system, go play with it.
right,
And it took a while for people to learn the code, learn the technology, get familiar with it, start building things, break some things, like it took a while. And then once people started getting used to it, then you saw this huge rush of just everything coming to the market, building DeFi, building all these different things that you basically see on Ethereum now.
so it's sort of part of, I guess,
It's
the
part of
culture.
the growth.
Yeah,
People need to learn from the ground up.
yeah. I think it's part of the speed at which we're developing. Also,
Hmm.
all this stuff is moving really, really fast, and it's just when you move this fast, you're going to not do everything perfectly,
Yeah.
which is fine. But I do, and maybe this is our job to sort of like go out and hunt for this information and find a way to get it.
Hmm.
So, yeah, maybe we can work on that for future shows.
Well, so just to go back to the subnet thing, I think if I'm just speculating, I could see some new like areas of business that people could get into, because every time you have one of these new sectors of the market, people are going to start building new services and economies around these things. And so I could see, maybe maybe I'm completely wrong on this, but this is just from my, thoughts. Um, I could see somebody building a service where you kind of have some, like a third party who would do a transaction for you, and then you just pay them back, for example. So if you didn't want to bridge all your funds onto a subnet, maybe some smart, snappy dev team build some kind of nice system to make your transactions for you on any subnet you choose, and then you just reimburse them for their transaction.
Right,
And it could be a way to make the transactions happen faster, easier, and cheaper. And they would just take like a small little fee for their service.
right, right. Okay. Um, I think we should close out our pod for the week. My sort of final thoughts on subnets are that this implementation, this first real subnet, sort of almost was the best case scenario that could have happened this week. It was really successful. There's no huge bugs. I tried using it and was not able to. I would view that as a minor bug. But you know, a ton of money was transferred to this subnet, and it hasn't crashed, and it, you know, it looks really, really, really good. So I don't think we could have hoped for something better. Any closing thoughts, Jared?
Not really.
Okay. Well, in that case, if you're still here, thank you. And please follow us on all the places. And if you leave comments, and if you like our podcast, that's great, on YouTube or wherever you're listening to it. And if you leave comments, Jared replies to all the comments with snarky remarks. So, you know, you can enjoy that.
Yep.
Good. Okay. All right. Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.